Hello, and welcome to this week's LCM Show, where, oh boy, we have a lot to talk about at the box office. Not only are we going to be talking about Supergirl, we're going to be discussing Minions and Monsters, the few new releases of this week, and new Backrooms Extended Cut, as well as what's coming up for you to watch this week. So, let's start with the big one, Supergirl. Now, I have not reviewed Supergirl yet. I am planning to review it. I have seen the movie. I want to save most of my opinion for the review, so we'll save that for now. But it's quite clear at this point Supergirl is not doing so super. I mean, it suffered a 74% drop in its just second weekend, and its first weekend wasn't exactly raking in the money as it was. Now, as you can see on the chart, it's red. It's in the red. I don't think there's any chance of this movie making a profit. It's aiming for 300 million, I believe, to make a profit, and I do not believe it will get there, at least theatrically. There's always the ancillary market, VOD, but these are the numbers that people really pay attention to, and they're not great. They're really not great. You know, there was a slight hope that perhaps some audiences would rally behind the film, but I just don't think that's really came to fruition. I think the overall consensus is that it's just not a very good film. Even people who aren't coming from the very toxic space of criticism from the film, they don't like the film. So what exactly has gone wrong with Supergirl? Apart from everything. So, first of all, let's talk James Gunn. Now, as many of you know, I have quite a few problems with James Gunn. I'm not his biggest fan. I've certainly been a big critic of his for a long time. But way back when he was announced as the head of DC Studios, I did make a pledge that I would attempt to cover his DC universe and his projects as unbiasedly as I could. Because, you know, even though I have problems with him, I don't particularly like his movies, I can absolutely still admit that he's a good filmmaker. He's made some good films, and I do really enjoy Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and number 2. I think number 2 is probably his best film he's ever made to date, including Superman. But yeah, he's a good filmmaker. He's just not really a filmmaker that aligns with my tastes. I don't find a lot of his comedy that funny, just to me personally. Lots of people do, which is great, but it's not really my type of comedy. And then obviously, my biggest problem with James Gunn, well, is twofold. It's one, he's really made an enemy of himself of quite a few press people as of late. You know, he's came down particularly very hard on Grace Randolph, and pretty much always has. And don't get me wrong, Grace Randolph is a journalist, so she may say stuff people disagree with, things like that. But, you know, I think particularly when you're a creative in Hollywood and you're trying to level up as this sort of big shot DC head, Kevin Feige-esque figure who also makes films, you kind of want the press on your side. And as you can see, James Gunn does not have the press on his side right now, which is new for James Gunn. He's not experienced a real backlash from the press like this, even when he had his Twitter scandal, which is, for if anyone is wondering, that is the main reason I do not like James Gunn nor choose to really support him that much. But, you know, I cover the movie industry. He is part of the movie industry. I can't help that. James Gunn has never quite had to deal with, in the sense of he is now, of a lot of blame and fingers being pointed at directly him from the media. But he's largely done this to himself. So when he came on as the head of DC Studios, everyone said, this is a bit of a brave decision as a creative to do something so business oriented, because it's a big discussion in not just Hollywood, but really a lot of different industries of whether creatives can make good business people and vice versa. And I think they absolutely can, and we've had evidence of that many times. But I think it's rare. It's a lot rarer than many people would think. And because of that, I think more people try it and fail than try it and succeed. And that's why we don't see it particularly often. Like Kevin Feige, who is obviously James Gunn's blueprint, although we'll talk about some of the issues they're following from their predecessor. in a bit. But, James Gunn's very clearly coming for Kevin Feige's nachos, as to say. And Kevin Feige is not a creative. He is solely in the business side of things. He does not make movies, he does not write movies, he puts them together. He does the logistics behind it. He figures out what people want to see, etc. He gets the hiring done, and then he lets the creatives take over. And that, in large part, is what led to Marvel and the MCU being such a success for such a long time, because even though they had all these different creatives coming in and bringing their own sort of things to the table, they were always sort of reined in that bit by Kevin Feige, who would, he had this plan, he wants this to tease this and this to do this and etc. And even if people didn't like this or that, there's a good chance that most of you watching, there's at least one MCU film you like, right? And that's very deliberate. When they particularly started experimenting with genres, that was very deliberate. They wanted the new viewers turned on to the MCU to tune in for Endgame and Infinity War, which they did. I don't really know what James Gunn is going for here. I mean, he's clearly trying to go down... I don't want to spoil anything, so for those of you who don't read comics, I don't want to exactly go too far down what he's clearly teasing coming up, but I feel like he's making a mistake with the comics he's choosing to go with, solely because I feel like James Gunn's DC Studios, particularly at this point with Supergirl, seem to be repeating the exact same mistakes Zack Snyder's DCEU made. Now, I loved Zack Snyder's DCEU. As many people know, I advocated for it. I started up my entire LCM podcast with its first episode being about the Snyderverse. But there's no denying it was very divisive, and it ultimately did not work. Now, there's a few reasons it did not work, and it seems like James Gunn and co have learned nothing from it. So what do I mean by that? Now, again, I don't want to spoil Supergirl, so we're not going to go too far in depth, but let's take a look at some of the issues that Zack Snyder's DCEU had and compare it to what's going on with DC Studios at the moment. 1. Fractured fanbase. DC has, for a while now, had a very strong problem with a fractured fan base. It's the same problem Star Wars has, it's the same problem the MCU nearly had, but they seem to have maybe got away with that one. But because they've released so many different projects from so many different creatives, there's so many different universes and different stories people can follow and get invested in, it ultimately leads to there not really being a core audience anymore for DC. The core audience is fractured. They're watching Matt Reeves' Batman, they're watching animated stuff, then some are reading comics, then some love James Gunn and want to watch it, and some don't love James Gunn and they just want Zack Snyder's DC and they only watch that. It's so fractured that there's not that core audience anymore that will go and see it because it's a DC movie. And that is a really, really big problem. It was a problem for Zack Snyder, and it's becoming a problem for James Gunn. Now, the reason you also want, all your audience and everything to be on the same page when it comes to your movies is so when you do have those big reveals and the big Avengers moment, it hits. One of the things that made Infinity War and Endgame hit so much for people was that this is something they'd have invested 10 years in. So that's 10 years worth of story essentially coming to a conclusion. James Gunn does not have that luxury. He does not have 10 years to build DC Studios. There's new leadership coming in. They're going to want results straight away. And if they don't get results, he will probably be given the boot. I'm not saying it to be harsh. I think it is just the truth. And I think many people who know Hollywood know that, particularly if you know how the Ellisons operate. They're results driven, which isn't a bad thing. And Hollywood is kind of in need of that. It's been struggling to deliver results for a while, especially the comic book genre. But, James Gunn doesn't seem to be helping it. He seems to be making the same mistakes. And the second biggest mistake, in my opinion, that James Gunn made was greenlighting the ending of this movie. The ending of this movie not only spits in the face of the fans of the comic book Superwoman Edge of Tomorrow, which is genuinely a good comic book, by the way. I do recommend you read it. If you've seen Supergirl and you're like, this sucked, read the comic. It's nothing like this movie, okay? It's like got the tiniest inklings of what made the comic great, but you should read the comic. You'll have a much better time. But they fundamentally changed not only the ending, but they made Kara do something that, in my opinion, is so controversial and is the exact same thing Zack Snyder had Henry Cavill's Superman do. And no less in his debut movie. And that never, ever faded from controversy for the DCEU, for Henry Cavill, for Zack Snyder, or any other project that they were involved in. And it even, of course, went back onto Batman as well, when it seemed like Batman was, killing people. And we were like, whoa, Batman doesn't kill, but he kind of does, but he kind of doesn't. So that one was more of a grey area. But having the ending of Supergirl, again, without getting into spoilers, is such a misunderstanding of the ending of the comic. And James Gunn, who is supposed to be the comics guy, like I said, he wants to be the Kevin Feige of DC. Kevin Feige, if he was at DC and someone said, I'm adapting Superman, Woman of Tomorrow, he's like, great. And they showed him this movie and he got to that part, and you know what part I'm talking about if you've seen it or know what happens. He would have said, what the hell is this? Get away from that comic. You clearly did not understand what you were reading, or probably you didn't even read it at all. You probably just got some chat. Do you know what? It's almost as if they asked ChatGPT to summarize the comic for them. And because ChatGPT is wrong, it probably misinterpreted the ending of that comic. And so that's what they ran with. And she was like, oh, this comic's really brilliant, isn't it? And everyone's like, what? This isn't the what is this? So yeah, that's pretty rough, and it's the same mistakes Zack Snyder made with Henry Cavill's Superman. But I feel like Zack Snyder's decision could be slightly justified for multiple reasons. We're not even going to go into it now. We have talked so much about Zack Snyder's DCU just on this channel. I don't want to talk about it anymore. It's done. But he made that choice, and it could be argued that it was a good choice or a bad choice, but it at least had some grounds in the comics. The choice they made at the end of Supergirl was just either a complete misunderstanding of the ending, or they just didn't read it, or didn't care. Maybe they didn't care, and they were like, well, I can do this better. And speaking of doing this better, let's talk about Hollywood and source material. So Hollywood, particularly as of late, seems to have a real issue with respecting the source material. And as time has proven again and again and again, if you are going to adapt source material, adapt the source material. It's all well and good to maybe add things here and there, maybe bring the world more to life. That's what in large part made Disney's live action remakes so successful for a while. Was the fact that they felt like they were taking these animated films that were slightly restricted because of when they were made and sort of opening them up to today's standards. It's arguable to each person, of course, whether you think they did it effectively or not, but it's what they were trying to do. And I think for the most part, people did understand that. And they made a lot of money from it. They made a lot of money. I don't know if they're going to make a lot of money with Moana. Although they could. Moana has been a very big sleeper here, and we will talk about Moana later on in the coming up this week section. So stay tuned for that. So yes, same problems as DCU. And speaking of, directors and all this stuff, let's talk about Craig, who is the director of this movie. Now I have to say, I actually really like. I'm going to butcher his last name probably, but Craig Gillespie. I like his movies. I think he's a very talented director. There is not a single movie of his that I watched and thought, let's give this guy a Supergirl film. Craig Gillespie works on character drama and, emotions and tension, which is great for a comic book movie, sure, but you also need to have, experience with delivering action and fan service, and, it's a whole different ballpark to, like, an awards film. An awards film, you are meeting very different criteria, And in a way, that's almost what it felt like Supergirl was trying to be. It was trying to be like awards bait, the movie. Like awards bait, the comic book movie version. Like, look at us, we're Supergirl. And you're like, yes, you are. And this movie sucks. I can't believe half of this stuff got away with being greenlit. And then Craig is going on a bit of a run in the press right now. And I guess, like I said, James Gunn's making enemies in the press, so they're running with it. And he is pretty much blaming everyone else but him on this film. He's like, I didn't want to do this, but they made me, and all this stuff. And at first, I have to say, even though I have major problems with James Gunn, I didn't think it was quite fair that so much of this blame is being shifted onto him, movies are a group effort, and, at the end of the day, no one really goes into making a movie with the intention of making a bad film, right? But here's the thing that I realised, involving James Gunn, and why I think he's not only getting so much of the blame, but why he kind of should. So when James Gunn came into DC Studios, he made it very apparent he was the public face of this new DC cinematic universe, right? If you wanted to know something about this new cinematic universe, the person you asked was James Gunn, whether it was on Twitter or, I don't know, at a show, whatever. You'd ask him and he'd most likely answer, which is a huge mistake. He should have had someone handling his social media accounts from the moment he signed that contract. Oh well. But, he interacted with fans a lot on social media. He made a lot of headlines through social media releases, like press releases. And ultimately, James Gunn has made himself such the face of the DC Studios cinematic universe. Who knows what it's freaking called at this point, right? I guess it's called DC Studios, but that... He's made himself such the face of it that now anything that comes out from this DC universe is attached to his name. So therefore, in my opinion, anything that his name is attached to, a good executive would make sure it's to quality. It's to their standards. It's to the standards of a James Gunn film. And Supergirl is not to the standards of a James Gunn film. It's inspired by a James Gunn film. You see many inspirations for many different films throughout the movie, but none of it is on the level of a James Gunn film. And when, as an executive, and this is one of the problems with being a business and creative hybrid, it's very rare to be able to do both well, because as creatives, your hubris will get in the way. You think you have the best ideas, and you probably do have some really great ideas, but whose time is it worth? Is it worth the time of the audience? And if they ultimately decide it's not, like they have here, what was it for? You made a movie, great, and you may be proud of that movie, and that's really great. But if you're not getting the box office, you're not getting critical success, it could really harm your career, right? So, in my opinion, James Gunn should have done much more to make sure that this movie, even though he wasn't directing it, was to his level. And maybe he thought it was, right? Maybe he genuinely thought this was a good film, and he thought this is a great script. But I don't know how he could think. Part of me really does question whether any of them actually read this comic. I really do, because it's really unfathomable to me how it could be so misinterpreted. And, I think box office shows that was a mistake. And then, lastly, the trouble with Supergirl, I do think, is comic book fatigue. Oh, it's the dreaded words, comic book movie fatigue. But it's real. It really is real. I think we've seen so much evidence of it at this point. It's real. It's here. Video games are taking the comic book movie space. It's a mess. I do feel like at this point, we're going to see a few hits from the comic book movie genre every now and then. But for the most part, I think the comic book movie genre got so oversaturated, it's done. Also, a big problem with the comic book movies, I'd say, particularly for the MCU, the MCU, would be they've adapted some of the best stories already. They've already done it, sometimes multiple times, if you're talking about, X-Men. So what's left to adapt? And then, if we talk about Secret Invasion, let's not. Let's not talk about that again, because I'll get even more pissed off. So, I think that's a real problem as well. How do you find something worth redoing? They tried to do Young Avengers, I believe, with this new phase of the MCU, and it didn't work, but people told them it wouldn't work because the comics did not sell. I think nowadays we're going to see those few really successful comic book movies be either like the Avengers movies, right? Because they're so big, they're such a big brand, and they are an event. Or I think we're going to start seeing more things like the Batman, Joker, where they're taking these ideas from the comics, these characters from the comics, but they're coming up with something new for it. And I think that's a good idea, because that way you sort of alleviate the fan expectations of adapting this and this and this, and you just say, hey, I was inspired by this, but I've done this instead, to not step on the toes of it. That sounds a lot more respectful than, Craig Gillespie saying, well, I'm not adapting the comic because who wants to watch a movie of a comic they've already read? The people paying for the ticket. That's who. Because regular people do not repeat watch a movie like this, You need fans to repeat watch a movie, and if they hate your movie and it seems like an insult to them, they're not going to see it again. So anyway, that is Supergirl, and it is a very negative conversation, but I do want to, make it clear that even though I want to save most of my thoughts for Supergirl, I don't think this is mostly Millie Alcock's fault. She's had some controversy, but I do think she does a really good job with what she's given in the film. And people loved her in Superman. So I don't think Millie Alcock is the big problem, and I think she should overall be perfectly fine after this film. I reckon she's going to call Margot Robbie or something like that, and she'll be fine. Maybe do some awards fair, things like that. Get back on the train. I think she'll be fine. Honestly, if I was Millie Alcock, I don't know what contract she signed for Supergirl, but I'd be looking for a way out. I'd be like, and I think some people would actually respect her for that as well, and she should be like, look, they didn't take care of me for this film. They didn't deliver me a good film that I enjoyed being a part of, because it didn't seem like she did based on the press. And she's just had a bad time with it. So why continue with it? Why continue going down that rabbit hole? Just get out of it now before you're too deep. The curse of DC continues, I guess. The curse of DC. How many people must DC... it's interesting. It's half a joke when we say it's the curse of DC. DC curses everyone who touches it. Zack Snyder, James Gunn, Gal Gadot, Dwayne Johnson, Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill, Ray Fisher, Ezra Miller, Walter Hamada, Kevin Sujihara. Let's go again. Jason Schreier. Whoever the guy who took over after that for Warner Brothers was. Amber Heard. How many people has DC That's scary. I don't know why anyone agrees to work for DC. Todd Phillips? Why do people keep agreeing to work for DC? I'd be like, get that bad vibes away from me. I don't want to go anywhere near your franchise. Thank you. Unless Christopher Nolan's involved, leave me alone. Unless Christopher Nolan or Matt Reeves are the ones I'm working with, you can jog on. No, I'm not touching this. Moving on from one disaster to another. Now, to be fair, I say it's a disaster. It's not an overall disaster. As you can see, it's only in the yellow. So Minions and Monsters, it has made back its budget, which is really great. It's not quite made its budget back right now, sorry, but it's a couple of million away from it. So it's going to make money, which is great. But for a Despicable Me movie, it's not great. I mean, look at these numbers. Despicable Me is usually a juggernaut of a franchise, particularly in the summer. Now, there's a few reasons I think this movie hasn't done as well. Number one, Nobody really cares about Hollywood insider movies. It's really a shame because I find them some of the most interesting things ever. But audiences have proven time and time again they have no interest in watching a movie pretty much glorifying Hollywood and talking about itself, pretty much. They're just not interested in it. They don't care about the history of the film. They just want to watch a good film. And Minions and Monsters is essentially an entire movie about the Hollywood system, which makes me very interested in it. I'll absolutely be going to see it. But you know, for a general audience, that's not quite their cup of tea. And then furthermore, kids seem to have been quite bored by the movie from lots of reaction. It seems like kids were like, what the heck is this crap? Get it away from me. I can't blame them. Now, also, in turn with that, I think another problem with Minions and Monsters is this is a children's movie that seems weirdly geared towards adults, and not in like an inappropriate way or anything, but in a way of apparently there's like Citizen Kane jokes about the incoming recession in this movie, and what kid is gonna they must be so bored watching this film. Like, this really does feel like a children's movie that sort of forgot it has to cater to kids as well as parents. Like, you know, as many know, usually the best and really successful and beloved children's movies are the ones that appeal to both kids and adults. Like, the kids can watch it and have a great time, but then the adults watch it, pick up on stuff the kids don't, thankfully, obviously, and you know, it still stays within, you know, acceptable, you know, grounds. It's nothing like crazy, but it's enough to keep parents as invested as their kids, so that they're not just sitting there like, oh my god, what am I watching? And I think this one kind of just focused on the parents. It doesn't seem like a movie that kids would be appealed to. And maybe part of it is because I think it was the last Minions movie had that TikTok trend where it was like young adults and film bros. But that was more of a, here's the thing, Hollywood always seems to think a social media trend is going to equate to it actually materializing, and it doesn't. It's very rare that actually happens. Usually a social media trend is something for a week or two and then it disappears. So, yeah, Minions and Monsters isn't doing too hot, but it will make back its money. But the reason it's in the yellow isn't because it's a failure by profit standards, but it is a failure from the Despicable Me franchise standards. Now, as for Toy Story 5, there's not an pardon me. There's not overly a lot to talk about with Toy Story 5, except for whether or not we think it's going to join the $1 billion club. I don't know. I think it could. I think it's got a strong chance of joining it, or maybe just shy of it, because it does have, of course, upcoming competition from The Odyssey, Spider-Man, and this week we'll talk about the competition it has. But there's not really, this week in particular, theatrically, there's not much standing in Toy Story 5's way. Like, the audiences for a lot of the films coming out this week are not the ones for the audience of Toy Story 5. Unless, I don't know, there could be a kid who's really into, you know, watching Toy Story on the weekend and then Evil Dead on a Monday. Why not? No, it's kind of like I was really as a teenager. I watched horror films from way too young. I should not have watched them from as young as I was. Very bad, but oh well. So yeah, Toy Story, I think, will join the $1 billion club, or at least come shy to it. Toy Story 5 has done great. The only reason I give it an orange for the this weekend is it's not the best, you know, we've seen from a Pixar Disney movie. It could have made a bit more money this weekend, I think, and because Minions and Monsters wasn't the big hit people expected, I feel like it should have made a bit more. It should have made a little bit more. So it's in the orange. It's just in the orange. It's okay though. Don't cry for Toy Story 5 or Pixar. They're fine. Now next, this is interesting. Young Washington from Angel Studios is our next one. Wow. Now Angel Studios have been, I'd say they've solidified themselves at this point as a box office presence. When they come around, they're usually always in at least the top 10. They have decent-ish holds, and people actually really enjoy their films. Now, I haven't seen this, but this seems like just, what Mwah, brilliant idea to release this on July 4th weekend. I mean, come on. And from a studio like Angel Studios, which I think a lot of people who really celebrate July 4th are probably very into. I think that's just such clever. That's such clever tying to a holiday. I think that was brilliant. No wonder they were third. I'm surprised they didn't go higher, to be honest, but I guess they're against two very popular kids' films, and I don't think I don't think many kids would be saying, "Can we go watch Young Washington instead of Toy Story 5?" Some might though. People like history. Probably us autistic kids we like history. The others probably don't. But you know, well done to Angel Studios. They continue to do really well. I've actually yet to watch any of their films, but I do want to check them out. As some of you may know from my Disclosure Day review and my way back when the Conjuring 2 review where I discuss it, I am religious, to a degree, and I'd like to maybe check out a few Angel Studios films. See what all the hype is about. Now, as for Disclosure Day, which I love Disclosure Day. I'm so happy it's still here. I mean, it looked, from the opening, it looked like it would have already been gone. But Steven Spielberg came through. So as you can see, it is in the orange. It needs to make, I believe, around 300 million to break even. I don't think it's going to break even. But the reason it's not red is it's making its way up to its break even point enough that once it hits ancillary, digital, things like that, I think it will probably begin turning a profit. So that's nice for Steven Spielberg. It's good for this movie. And it's not a total embarrassment. Yay! Yay for Disclosure Day, the movie that it seems like only I liked. No, lots of people liked it. It's just divisive. It's a very divisive film. It seems like it's one of those you love it or you hate it. I fell into the love it camp. You can check out my review on my channel. There's a half. It's split into half, so spoilers and non-spoilers and then spoilers. So if you don't want to like have it spoiled for you, you can absolutely watch the first half and see what I thought of the movie. Okay, let's talk about everyone's obsession with Obsession. I'm gonna make that joke like every time. So still in the top 10, even upon its digital release. And I did watch the digital release. I think I might review, because I missed the chance to review Obsession when it was out in cinemas properly. I'll probably do a review now. It's the same thing I'm going to do with Backrooms. I'm going to review the extended footage and make that basically the review of the film. So I'll be reviewing Obsession as well. I watched the unrated cut. Couldn't tell much of a difference, to be honest with you, but I do think there was a clear difference in the car scene. I think that was the biggest one, to my knowledge. You know what scene I'm talking about. And I feel like it was quite disturbing. I swear you could, they seemed to show her almost still alive a little bit after the steering wheel and like dying, which I don't recall seeing properly in the cinema version. I'm not sure, but either way, really good for Obsession. And look at how much money it's made worldwide. Oh my god, nearly $500 million. $500 million. I don't actually know what the most successful horror movie of all time, but I would not be surprised if this is closing in on it. This is incredible, and it has officially broken a 53-year-long record held by Enter the Dragon for the highest grossing movie ever to be made for under $1 million. Obsession, of course, for those who don't know, was only made for $950K. And I mean, James Gunn must be so mad. James Gunn must be furious. He's like, how is this movie making what I should be making? And it's like, well, they kind of made a good movie. But yeah, it broke the record. It's doing incredible. I mean, it's his biggest drop to date, but 45% in its, 8th week or whatever? Come on, this is incredible. Obsession is really that bitch, and it should be very proud of itself. I'm so happy that this movie has done so well. I think it's an excellent film. I can't recommend it for horror fans enough. It's so good. I think this is the start of a very good careers for everyone involved. I mean, Curry Barker. I always mess up his name. Curry Barker or Baker, whatever it is. I'm gonna call him a Big C. There we go, Big C. He's had one feature-length film and already has $500 million of box office, nearly. That's freaking incredible. He's earned so much goodwill and capital off this movie, and I do think this will help its award chances a lot. I don't know if it's going to win anything, although you never know these days. Horror is starting to get more respect, which is great, but it's still not quite taken as seriously as others. But I think at the very, very least, Indy should be getting the Best Actress nomination. I think that's a given. I don't know if she'll win it, but I think she will certainly be nominated, at least. Okay, as for the rest of the top 10, Backrooms Extended Cut. So, this was quite clever because they did also, again, release this just in time for July 4th weekend. Although, I think the trouble with Backrooms is, don't get me wrong, it's done very well, it's doing very well, but I just think it's sort of, people are ready for it to go to digital now. I think people are ready to check it out at home and they want to see what else is going to come down the line. My apologies for that, it is so hot in the UK right now, my stuff just overheated. So if you can hear that slight fan in the background, I do really apologise. I know it's probably annoying, but I have no other choice. Otherwise, we will not get through this video. So, the rest of the top 10. Well, we were talking about Backrooms, but I think we said everything. Check out my review of the extended cut that will be coming this week. I'm excited to talk about it, and I hope the new footage is worth it. The rest of the top 10, not much to talk about, although The Invite is doing nicely as it gets ready to go wide this coming week. As for this week, what have we got to look forward to? Well, of course, we have Moana coming out, the live-action remake which Disney is hoping can ride the waves of Toy Story 5. I liked that. You know, I don't know if Moana is going to be as big as the animated, but I think it could be. I think people do really like the franchise, so that's good. Then, Evil Dead Burn. Now, some people are quite skeptical of its tracking, which is 30 to 40 million, which I can understand. It is quite on the high end, but I reckon I reckon the tracking for this has come from the real horror renaissance as of late, and I think it could. I reckon it will come in maybe at around 30. But, you know, really great for Evil Dead either way, and I'm very excited. I will be checking it out this week and reviewing it by the end of the weeks. Then, as I said, The Invite finally goes wide. That is Olivia Wilde's newest film. Night Nurse, which is a new horror movie, is coming out in a limited release, so be sure to check that out if you can. That should be quite good. And then for digital, The Furious finally comes out on digital. I'll definitely be checking that out. I'm not sure if I'll review it. Maybe a quick 60-second review that I do over on my TikTok and socials. Be sure to follow me over there. Backrooms, of course, out on digital. Passenger is coming out on digital. Passenger, by the way, if you did not check Passenger out in cinemas, I actually really loved that movie. I hope you check it out. And you may actually like it more at home than in the cinema. But I think it's a decent movie. It's a good popcorn horror movie. Okay? And that's, you know whether that's your cup of tea or not. Then as for another horror movie, we've got Black Box, which is coming out, which is about an unexplained phenomena that occurs on a flight. And this is directed by the director of Final Destination 5. That's very interesting. I'll definitely be checking that out. On streaming, Faces of Death will be coming out on Shudder. That is, of course, the Faces of Death reboot. I didn't review it in video, but I do have a review of it on my Letterboxd. It's okay. It was okay. It kind of... Maybe it wasn't as good as I remembered, but it was okay. It's worth a watch if you've ever watched like the original or you're just interested in it. Then, I'm Not Afraid, which is a new horror series coming onto Netflix from Mexico releases, and Little House on the Prairie. I've heard a lot about this show. I might be checking it out, just because people seem to really like it so far, so I'll probably check it out. The 5-Star Weekend comes out on Peacock, and Tyra Banks is a permanent judge now on Project Runway. That comes out with season 22 on Hulu. So, what are your thoughts on the box office this week? What did you watch this weekend, if anything? What are you going to watch this weekend? And what do you think Moana will come in at? Do you think it will be interesting to see if it matches the animated debut? Because if I remember, the animated film didn't explode out of the gate, but it had such good holds and good word of mouth that it just powered its way through. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. All right, that is this week's LCM show. Thank you so much for joining in. Be sure to like and subscribe down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye.